and then you take the negative of that to get the checksum. Now, how do you represent the negative in the numbering schemes that we've done? Well, what you do is use complement, okay, whereby all you do is flip all the bits and then add 1. So that was kind of the binary operation we need to do. Once we've calculated the 22, we need to flip all of the bits of it and add 1 to it. Not and it with 1, which I've seen some folks doing, but invert them and add 1, mathematically add 1. Right, does anybody have, do I have, in fact, a copy of the practical? Does anybody have a copy of the sheet with them at all? So I didn't bring one, which is rather silly of me, because it's got the code on it. There wasn't a sheet. Well, they were, except they were electronic, I suppose. All right. Well, this is. I have something that looks a little bit like an old version, so this will have to be. Remind me to. Now, when I thought of doing this, I thought, oh, this is quite easy. They'll know how to do this. They just shove it in an array and add up the contents of the array. Little did I think at that point that we haven't done arrays yet. Possibly not the brightest move on my part, but let's see what we can do. So, we need to talk a little bit about arrays. You can do this without going anywhere near arrays. There are ways of doing it, just processing it a byte at a time. But for ease, I thought we'll do it as an array and show them this as a board. So, the first thing we need to worry about is the idea of an array variable. Now, this diagram should start looking very, very familiar. Okay? What is an array? An array is just a list of stuff in a computer language. Now, I think on here, rather bizarrely, apologies, I did change my nomenclature as I went through this thing. I decided to call my array by the name buffer. Okay. So what actually is an array and how do we access it? How do we use it in C#? Well, it's just a thing with different cells, so it's a list. And the marvelous part about it is, if we want to refer to a given cell, we just use its number, and it's 0 based. So buffer 0 refers to the 0th position in the array. Buffer 1, that position, and I'm sure you can see that we can go on down like that. So if I wanted to say something like this, I wanted to add them all up, I could in C# write something a lot like this. Could. Wood rubber. Done it again. Good. Now you know why I do all the slides on PowerPoint to lose things in a lecture theatre. So I can use these things just exactly the same as ordinary variables in C#, except they look like that. Except you wouldn't do that. One of the nice things about them is that they match well onto the idea of for loops. Now I know you've done for loops, yes? C#? Okay. If you want to add something up, what you actually do is this. Nope, you wouldn't do that at all. have we done? We've put this statement inside a for loop. And each time we go around that for loop, the variable I is going to have a different value. It's going to start at 0, so the first time we come through here, it's going to say sum equals sum plus buffer, and there's an I in there, which will be set to 0, so it'll be exactly the same as writing buffer 0. Alright, great. So we've done exactly what we did over here. We've got started at 0, sum equals sum plus 104. Match. We go round the for loop the next time. I is incremented. You're happy that that's the same as I equals I plus 1? In the bad old days, you actually wrote things like that, and code was easy to understand because it said I equals I plus 1, which mathematically makes no sense whatsoever, but kind of intuitively you can see what it does. But these days we're all fancy and advanced and made progress, so now it's I plus plus. Incidentally, have you tried putting I equals I plus 1 in there in for loop ever? It works perfectly happily. It means exactly the same thing. If we were being really professional, and use the word in the derogatory sense, we could abbreviate that line to say, oh no, which way around is it? Sum
plus equals.
Plus equals? Thank you. You've seen it. Which means exactly the same thing, that you want to add to sum whatever is in buffer. Personally, I think for when you're setting out learning, that makes more sense. Sum equals whatever's already in sum plus buffer. But hey, we've got nice fancy syntax which saves us typing 4 characters, so that's got to be programmed. Okay. Whichever way you do it, it goes around this loop. Each time it increments that, so it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. That changes automatically. That's how you sum up an array using a for loop. That's how you access individual item in the array from its inside the for loop. So you imagine that those numbers are in there, but in the code, what's actually there is the index that you're using for your for loop. There's one vital bit missing from our for loop. What's that that's called?
The conditions for continuing to loop.
The condition for continuing to loop. Brilliant. We obviously want to go down here till we get to the end. Alright. How do you know what that should be? Well, you can say buffer.length. Now that will give you a number which is how long is that array. Okay. So here. One, two, three, four. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What value is buffer.length of that array? 6. Well done. Okay. It's 6 because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes in that array, or pigeonholes, if you like. Oh, that's interesting. The subscripts, the indexes, because they start at 0, go to 5. So 0 to 5, but the length is 6. Okay. Therefore, does our code over here work?
Says the last one.
I think, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well done. Because the numbering scheme for these things is different to the length, we've just got to watch where we stop that loop. I've seen innumerable people get that wrong, and they get trying to access out of bounds in the array.
It's buffer.length.
So again?
It should be buffer.length.
Buffer dot?
Just
Which just shows that anybody can get problems with your fence and gateposts problems. Okay, so just just watch that. We'll leave it like that. Quite right. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so we now know how we can go through an array and do some adding up. Well, great. On the actual example, it's shown us how we can go through the array and print the value out. So in fact, the only difference, the code even says buffer.length. I actually read my own code, I wouldn't know that. There you go. The only thing that's different here to what's on the bit of paper or on the task sheet you've got is the fact that we're doing some summing in there rather than some printing out, so we're doing some adding up. Now, let's just have a look at the overall strategy for all of this. Because what I asked you to do was to calculate the checksum and then append it to the file and write the file out again. So we've got several things that we need to do. So the very first thing that we were going to do was actually declare the array buffer. Note that all I've said is that the buffer is an array of bytes. I haven't said how large it is. We can do that. At that point, it doesn't exist. All we've said is that one day something called buffer will exist in this program, which will be an array of bytes, and we don't yet know how big it will be. And then the magic bit that we did in here, further down in the program, so put some dots in there. Okay, so at that point, we issue this file read all bytes testfile.dat command, and at that point, this thing is actually created, and all of the contents of our test file, which might be hello, get put in there. So in fact, that would create a buffer of length 5. If we just have a single word hello in there, it reads it into buffer. We do our checksum stuff, we end up with the value sum. We know that the next thing we have to do to sum is to flip all the bytes and add 1. So we've got all of these bits lying around all over the place. So we'll say we'll do the summing there. We'll produce the 2's complement. And now we've got to somehow get that 2's complement onto the end of a new file with the same contents. Now, how are you going to do it? We've seen numerous different solutions to this. What do you propose? What's the easiest way? Without me giving you the answer.
Create a new array.
Okay. Create